We have some breaking news on Habs coach Dominique Ducharme. We have news on who might be the first coach for the Seattle Kraken. Of course, Jack Adams Award was also handed out. And we have the latest free agent and trade rumors concerning Gabriel Landeskog, Jack Eichel, and Sam Reinhart. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have some very interesting breaking news here on Montreal Canadiens head coach Dominique Ducharme. Dominique Ducharme was scheduled to have a Zoom conference earlier this morning. That ended up being canceled, and the media was notified that Dominique Ducharme had some irregularities with his latest COVID test, and that he had to be sent home to isolate as precaution, and he was going to be tested again later in the day. And now we have word from Elliotte Friedman and Darren Dreger both putting out the information here that it appears as though Dominique Ducharme has a COVID positive test. It will be unavailable to the Habs for a minimum of 10 days. So if he's positive, you have to go through a longer stretch of time here before you can return. I'm not sure if there's any chance at all that he'd be allowed to be retested again in a couple days to see if there's possibly like a false positive, because that does happen on occasion. But if he had 2 tests with irregularities and one with a positive, that does not look good at all. So clearly you have to be concerned for the remainder of the Habs coaching staff. You also have to be concerned about the remainder of the Habs roster. I mean, with this virus and how it works, even though nobody else on the team might be positive today, we could see additional positive tests here in the not too distant future. Like, you just don't know, right? So this could be an impact here. I mean, Montreal and Vegas are tied in this series 1-1. As of the recording of this video, because it's still early in the day, so they haven't made any official announcements, but I don't know who will replace Ducharme this evening behind the bench as the head coach. Obviously, they have some guys like Luke Richardson, Alex Burrows. I'm not sure if Bergevin could go down to the bench. They do have some experienced coaches around, but this is not a situation like before when Claude Julien had to leave the bubble, when Kirk Muller could take over, where Muller was a very experienced coach, whereas, Burrows hasn't been coaching for too long. I mean, Richardson has. So I'm not sure what they do, but this is certainly not good news, and not only for Ducharme and for the team not to have their head coach, which is certainly going to throw things off probably, but just the fact that their whole team could have been exposed. If he's got it, who else has it is the question. So we'll have to monitor the situation, and I will update the pinned comment down below once more information becomes available here. But that's the latest as of right now. But this information could obviously be updated or changed before we get to game time tonight. So stay tuned. I'll keep you up to date once more information becomes available. Now, staying with the coach talk here for a little bit, of course, the Jack Adams Award was handed out last night, actually pretty much right after I recorded yesterday's video, indicating that Rod Brind'Amour had signed a 3-year contract extension with the Hurricanes. He was then announced as Coach of the Year, so quite a day for Brind'Amour. Like I said, he was formerly awarded number 17 as a player. Yesterday was June 17th. He got his 3-year contract extension with the Canes, and then also won the top coaching award. So clearly, great day for him. I know I've seen many media people indicating they felt that Quenneville might be the odds-on favorite here to win, but actually Quenneville finished 3rd in voting. Brind'Amour won by a good margin. Dean Evason of the Wild was 2nd. It was very interesting to look at the ballot breakdown of the votes after that. There's some really, really good coaches that barely get any recognition at all, including some guys like Barry Trotz and John Cooper. It's just kind of mind-boggling how some of the evaluations are put to place to decide who to vote for, but not that any of the top 3 didn't deserve it. They all had fantastic years. It's the first time in Canes history that their coach won Coach of the Year as well, so that's a nice milestone for the organization. The other thing that was a little bit different about this year's nominations as well is the Whalers-Canes connection. Of course, as you know, the Carolina Hurricanes used to be the Hartford Whalers. Well, all 3 of these guys are connected to that franchise. Of course, Dean Evason and Quenneville, both former players of the Hartford Whalers, and of course, Rod Brind'Amour, former player and now head coach of the now Hurricanes. Of course, Brind'Amour wasn't associated with the team when they were the Whalers, but joined them in Carolina not long after. So certainly an interesting little connection there amongst all 3. Now, staying with the coaching news, we have word from Elliotte Friedman that Rick Tocchet appears to be the hands-on favorite to likely be the first ever coach for the Seattle Kraken. He's already had 2 interviews with GM Ron Francis, and apparently there is a third one going to be taking place here shortly. I don't know the exact time frame, but it appeared to be sometime in the next few days is the information that we seem to be getting. We know Ron Francis had indicated before they had hoped, but I don't think feel pressured by, but wanted to hopefully have a coach by the end of June. So, of course, they still have just shy of 2 weeks to make that happen, for their own self-imposed deadline. But clearly, it would be wise if they have that in place at least a few weeks ahead of time before they get to the expansion draft, so he can be involved with that process a little bit and have a little bit of input on player personnel and entry draft and all that stuff. Probably would be wise in that scenario. But certainly, Tocchet and Francis are well known to each other, former teammates. Tocchet's a well-respected coach. I think he could be a really excellent candidate. We haven't heard much about too many other candidates there in Seattle. On the latest 31 Thoughts podcast that Friedman and Jeff Merrick put out today, he did indicate that former Ranger bench boss David Quinn has been interviewed as well, and apparently he heard that things went very well, but there hasn't been any word about a second interview. And with Tocchet getting a third, normally a third interview is to finalize things. So we will see if he indeed ends up being the first head coach in Kraken history. Of course, as they say, until it's done, it's not done. But I think there's really, really high odds here that this ends up taking place. Now, the Arizona Coyotes made a signing today as well, and that was 2018 7th-round pick Liam Kirk. Now, Kirk, back in 2018 when he was drafted, was the first ever player from the UK that was drafted by an NHL franchise. History in that regard, and there's been a lot of question marks over when he was going to join North America and come over and how things were going to go since then. Of course, he played a couple years on the Ontario Hockey League for the Peterborough Petes. Last year, he ended up playing over in the UK, represented his country most recently, just in the last little bit here at the World Championship tournament, and had a really solid showing. So clearly, he was looking to make the jump to North America. After the World Championships ended, there was word that he wanted to get an NHL contract in place. Even though he was drafted, he had never signed his entry-level contract. And there was word that the Coyotes were considering making a trade so he could sign with another franchise. And even when the signing was first announced, there was some speculation over whether or not it could be a sign-and-trade scenario. But that's not the case. He is indeed signing and staying with the Arizona Coyotes, so he gets his 3-year entry-level contract in place. So we'll see if the first ever drafted player from the UK can make an impact and cut the NHL roster this fall. Before we jump into the latest free agent and trade rumors with this video, I do want to take a quick moment here and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here, even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. Thanks very much for watching that promotional video. I greatly appreciate it. Now, jumping back into today's content, Elliotte Friedman also talked today in his latest podcast about some of the latest rumors around the NHL, including Gabriel Landeskog of the Colorado Avalanche. Now, he had indicated that he thought, based on what he's hearing in his own opinion, that the biggest decision the Avalanche need to tend to before they do just about anything else is get an extension in place for Cale Makar, because his contract is going to be a really big number. I think the Avs would like to get a long-term deal done because his value is only going to continue to grow and rise, and if the longer they take to sign a long-term deal, the more expensive it's going to get. But of course, Captain Landeskog, who's been there a long time and is a really solid player for them, needs a new contract as well, and they've been putting it off, obviously, to get the deal done and in place, and now he's, a pending free agent. They could lose their captain if they don't get a contract in place here soon. Doesn't mean he wants to leave, of course, but I'm sure once that window opens and he can speak to other teams, there would be a lot of interested parties interested in signing Landeskog, who can give you a variety of physical style of play and great offensive numbers, good leadership, and just an all-around solid player that could fit into just about anybody's top six. But Friedman believes, based on what he's hearing, that the Avs are going to do everything they can to get a long-term deal in place for Makar and get a good contract in place for Gabriel Landeskog. It might mean, though, that they have to create some salary cap space, which is going to mean cap casualties, as I mentioned before, between creating the space to do those things as well as expansion draft implications. I would not be shocked if they traded a defenseman, most likely being Girard or Graves, which I think Girard being the more likely of the two. Given his contract and style of play, they already have a lot of younger defensemen who can be that same type of player, where Graves gives you a little bit more size and physicality. So to me, that's what I think they would do. And it certainly could be other players like a Nazem Kadri or JT Compher that could end up being moved as well to create some more space necessary to get these guys back in the fold. But the Avalanche are going to be a very interesting team to watch after a playoff disappointment again, where they lost against the Vegas Golden Knights for the second consecutive year. You know they're going to be looking to bring back some key guys, but also make some changes and additions to get this team over the next hump here. Of course, they also have to settle their goaltending situations. Their starting goaltender, Philip Grubauer, also is a pending UFA. That's another big piece of the puzzle here. So the Avalanche are going to be a very interesting team to watch here once we get closer to free agency. Now, on to Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart. Now, the latest thoughts on the Eichel situation believe that Anaheim might just be the odds-on favorites for to land Eichel services. Now, for a variety of reasons, I do think there's going to be some other interesting teams that are in the mix. We've heard conflicting reports about the Rangers and the Kings being in and out, and to me, a lot of that is just negotiating tactics. I don't believe a lot of what I hear for teams being out, especially a team like LA. It makes a lot of sense that they would be in on him. Now, I believe they have a lot of faith in their existing prospect pool and younger players who could, possibly be as good as him down the road, like an Alex Turcotte or a Quentin Byfield or any of those guys. But still, he's an established player. At least you know what you get in Jack Eichel. Some of those guys you don't know. You think you know, they project high, but not everybody works out. So to me, it does make sense for them to explore it at least. Not sure they pull the trigger, but based on what Friedman was saying today in his podcast and what I've read elsewhere as well, the Ducks also make a ton of sense here. Could put together a really good package. There's a lot of talk, and many believe that the Sabres really want to send him to a Western team, not an Eastern team, which you see quite often. You see a lot of interconference trades that way, with especially bigger names, so that makes sense. But at the same time, there's also been a ton of talk that the Sabres are likely going to end up with 2, maybe 3 picks in the top 10 of this 2021 NHL draft. And the Ducks have the number 3 pick overall. So if they're willing to include that, as well as a few other pieces off their roster or prospects, they would have an excellent shot at a Jack Eichel trade. Now, I'm not sure exactly what it's going to take, but I know Friedman talked about the fact that they did not want to include Zegras or Drysdale when they were in talks to acquire Pierre-Luc Dubois. However, no offense to Dubois, but Eichel is a step above him when it comes to the elite level talent and being a all-around higher level player here, in my opinion. Now, Dubois could possibly reach some levels to be more comparable, but for right now, he's not. Jack Eichel is more established as a higher level, more offensive player, and I think they would be willing to pony up more in a case for Eichel than they would for PLD. Now, Friedman didn't come out and say that he thinks they will include one of those prospects, but he just made it sound like he thought there was a more likely scenario that they would for Eichel, but at the same time, he also said it's going to be a very interesting scenario to watch to see what kind of package they do offer the Buffalo Sabres, but not by any means 100% certain that they would include one of those prospects. But if they change their mind that they'll give them either Zegras or Drysdale with the first round pick this year, which is number 3 overall, then on top of that, you put in a piece or two off the roster. I'm not sure exactly what it would take, but you take at least one other decent contract off the books. Maybe it's Silverberg, maybe it's Rickard Rakell. Maybe the Sabres take back Adam Henrique too, and to get some money off the books for the Ducks to make things work more financially too. That's a possibility. I'm not sure. That's just me speculating, but still, they have the pieces. They have lots of other young players like Sam Steele, Max Jones, Max Comtois, Isaac Lennerstrom, Jacob Perreault. You throw in at least one of those players with either Zegras or Drysdale, the first pick, then there's 3 excellent assets throw in another one player or more off the roster, and you got one heck of a package. So to me, when they're saying the Ducks are a legit top contender and the Sabres could pick first and third in this draft, to me it does make a ton of sense, and I do think it's quite possible. So we're not saying that the Ducks are the for sure favorites, but it looks as though they've kind of propelled themselves to be in serious talks with the Sabres. Friedman said they're 100% talking, having serious conversations, and that their odds are pretty good at this point in time. Now, when it comes to Sam Reinhart, he's also got word that not only Vancouver, but Columbus has been apparently having a ton of conversations around this player as well. Now, of course, if they insist on trading Reinhart to the West, then a deal with CBJ may not materialize. But if the Ducks, for example, are having talks with the Sabres, and he said if things don't materialize on Eichel, they could pivot to Reinhart. There apparently could be mutual interest. And he also said, too, that he has word that some teams are looking to package Rasmus Ristolainen with one of these two guys as well, and that 2 out of the 3 could go together as a package deal. So Risto either going with Eichel or with Reinhart in a package deal. That is a possibility that we could see happen, and it doesn't mean it's going to, of course, but teams are talking to the Sabres about those options to see what it would cost and if they can possibly work something out. So certainly Reinhart, like I said, a guy's getting a lot of interest. I know the Canucks were mentioned pretty heavily before, and I still think they make a lot of sense for Reinhart as well. And Columbus also makes a lot of sense to get somebody to play with Patrick Laine. I think Reinhart proved this year he could be a top 6 center and be a productive one at that. So also makes a lot of sense for them too. So we will see what happens here, but obviously these two players are going to be generating a lot of buzz. All 3 of these Sabres players very, very likely to get traded and get a fresh start and new scenery before next season. So let me know where you think they end up. Give me your mock trades in the comments and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news and rumors on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.